Welcome. I'm Ron Baker, Director of the Canadian Small Church Ministry Centre, sponsored by Small Church Connections. And this is us, Canadian Small Churches in Actions podcast. Today, we have another special guest all the way from out on the coast. Well, as close to the coast as you're going to get in Canada, and just back from a great retreat camping. That's providing camping can be a retreat. So I'll let you introduce yourself, Brian, and you can tell us who you are, how bad the camping was, and the mosquitoes, although that may not be a problem for you, and what your ministry journey has been.
Hi, Ron. Yes, it was a great time camping. You know, sometimes it's just great to be away, nice and quiet, early mornings, and in the evenings, you don't have to travel back home. You can just stay right there. And, you know, I was just thinking about some people say I have an accent, and maybe it's hard to understand, but I really don't know what they mean, because I sound perfectly normal to myself. And I don't know why they would think I have an accent, but some people do. So
yeah. Well, you sound normal to me.
So if it sounds hard to understand, then that's why. So I'm originally from South Africa, and grew up there and lived there most of my life. I was a lawyer there in Cape Town, South Africa, and then we felt God call us to the mission field, and we went to South Korea. We were there for 8 years, living in an international school setting, and my wife and I worked as dormitory parents. So we had 32 teenagers from grade 9 to 12, 16 boys, 16 girls we had to look after. And then we had our own 3 kids. When I was in Korea, we weren't quite sure where God was going to take us next, because it seemed kind of strange to take me out of law and just for a year or two and then back. So during that time, we sought the Lord. And as I said, we were there 8 years. But during that time, I felt God speak to me and say that I need to go study theology. And we said, well, where shall we go? And it just came very clearly to us that it has to be Regent College, and that's in Canada. And so we came from Korea, we came to Canada to study at Regent. And when I finished my studies there, I got a position at a church, multicultural church, mostly Chinese, but also English speakers as well. And that was a multi-site church with 3 different congregations on each site. So all in all, was about 9 congregations, English, Mandarin, and Cantonese. And that was my initiation into pastoral ministry in Vancouver, was this Chinese church with multi-site. And then I was there for just over 5 years. And then I was looking for a change. And this small church now in Burnaby, 60 to 70 people, I got a call from them. And so I came out, and my world just changed tremendously, from a big church with many pastors and lots of support to a small church setting. And it's been great in many ways. It's been tough in other ways, but we'll probably talk about that some more.
All right. Well, that is quite a journey, I must admit. That brings up so many questions. We'll see how many questions we get through here. So if you were to, you've been in a larger urban church, now yes. You're in a smaller urban church. What distinguishes that smaller urban church from a large urban church, and maybe even a rural urban church, a rural small church, I should say?
Yeah, I suppose there's many things you could say. One of the ways that's very easy, I think, to relate to, it's just the fact that the planning is so much less in a small church than in a large church. When you have on one site, using the same buildings, 3 different congregations, for instance, you need to plan everything way in advance. You need to book the room that you want. You need to book the equipment that you need. Everything needs to be booked. Everything needs to be scheduled. But when you're just in a smaller church like where I am now, I'm the only pastor. And so, you could pretty much do some things on the fly. You still need to kind of give people notice where you can, but you don't have to book the room that you want. It's the only room that's there.
Yeah. During COVID, that's especially true, isn't it? I mean, how do you plan? What do you plan? And what kind of things you do as you say, on the side, or just do them?
Yeah. So, for us, myself and the elders talked about, when COVID started, we talked about how we are going to negotiate this time. And at first, I have to say, we thought it would only be like 3 weeks. And then we thought maybe 3 months. And now it's more than a year later. And here we are still in COVID. But two things we decided initially. We said, first thing is we need to have good communication. At least between the leadership, but also with the people as much as we can. So we went to weekly elders meetings. Even though you say, well, nothing's happening. Well, some stuff is happening, but you need to get good communication so there's no misunderstandings. Everyone is on the same page. Everyone knows sort of what we're trying to do and how we're going about it. So that was the first thing for us, is good communication, regular meetings amongst the leadership. And the second thing we did is we said we want a schedule for our people that will be a kind of a rhythm for them of church, which will be different. So we did Wednesday nights, we did prayer meeting, and Friday nights we always had care group, and we have different care groups where we just combined them into one for Friday evenings. So the care groups on Friday evenings and the prayer meetings on Wednesday evenings, everything was on Zoom. Mm-hmm. So we had to get that information out to folks. And then what we did is we said, okay, every Wednesday evening is on Zoom, every Friday evening is on Zoom. And then Sunday mornings, we did a streaming service on YouTube. So people got into that rhythm, Friday, Sunday, Wednesday, and just roll that around. And I think that there's a stabilizing influence. There's a steadiness that's there that I think was really good for people to know that there's a rhythm, to see the faces on the screen, not just, it's good to phone, it's great to phone, but it's always good to see someone's face on the screen, as I'm seeing yours right now. And so we did that. And those are the two things I think we did most of all to get us through this time.
Yeah. Now, I mean, this morning I'm together finally after a year and how long with a group of actual in-person seniors that I've worked with for how many years, and I haven't seen them for a year. And it was like, are we going to sit and chat with each other, or are we going to do a Bible study, or what are we going to do? And it was just really weird. And I'm awaiting the whole COVID as there's progressions and much more openness. How are you looking at reopening? I mean, I don't even know what reopening means anymore. Yeah. I'll let you answer that question.
Yeah. The first reopening we had was in June, July last year. Mm-hmm. And that was for a while. I think it's for like 3 months or 4 months or something until they shut us down. So we, as a leadership, we got together and we prepared quite a large document, what we called an action plan for reopening. And we had the action plan, which was a fairly large document. Then we had a smaller document, which was the protocol for a Sunday morning. And the protocol would be, as you come in the front door, how you are greeted, how you sanitize your hands, who you speak to, who takes you to your seat, what do you do with communion, the singing, the masks. Afterwards, after the service, we had disinfected wipes, which we handed out for folks just to wipe the seats where they were and so forth. And So we had the protocol for a Sunday morning, which was what everyone would follow as they came on a Sunday morning, but they could get that on the internet beforehand and be aware of what would be expected when they come to church Sunday morning. So we had a big plan, and then we had a small protocol just for Sunday mornings. And that got us prepared to open up somewhat. We tried, of course, to be within the guidelines. So people had to stay 2 meters apart. We roped off certain of the pews that people couldn't sit in. And the first 2 pews from the pulpit was roped off. So if there's someone speaking, that wouldn't carry to anyone sitting, in the pews. So those were kind of the practical things we did to reopen. And then we did a questionnaire, which we emailed out. We used something called SurveyMonkey, and everyone got some questions as to, would you be comfortable to come back to church? Would you be comfortable wearing a mask in church? And so forth. So we asked these questions to everyone in the congregation. And from that, we could tell that we had a sizable number of people who were really interested in coming back, even with restrictions. And so then we gave them advance notice, and we said, in 2 weeks from now, we will be opening up. And people then had to also phone ahead in the week and to the church office and register their names so that they will be ready to come. So we put those things in place, and then we did open up. But the one thing we couldn't do was music, because, as you know, Dr. Bonnie Henry doesn't like the singing on a Sunday morning.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, so that was an issue. But what we did is we spoke to our music team, and they pre-recorded songs for us, put that on a nice background, and we could have those electronically and just put them on the screen on a Sunday morning. And when we got closed down, I think maybe November last year, then we could do still the streaming from the church building, and we could still use the music that we had, because that was all pre-recorded. And so we could stream on a Sunday morning from there. But I got to take my hat off, to the elders, to the AV team, because you have to research the software that you'll be using to stream. You have to research, do you have the hardware capabilities? Do you have a camera that can work well for streaming? And in a small church, and this is the deal, in a big church, you'd have 10 volunteers, and anyone could, hold a camera, hold a mic, set up stuff. But in a small church, you have one guy doing AV, and he can't do all that by himself. So we had to get a PTZ camera that could be operated remotely, and so that you can sit with a little remote and you can move the camera around. So, you have to research all this stuff and then implement it, put it in place, and so forth. So that was, looking back, it was quite a task, but I'm just so thankful, because you've got people who are can-do people. And if you've got a can-do, you could have fewer of them, but if you have can-do people, you can get stuff done, right?
It's amazing, the innovation and the creativity that's happened in this last year.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at the church that I'm serving as an interim pastor in, moved from not streaming at all to streaming. You're talking about a PTZ camera, and I actually know what that is, because I've had to research, the whole thing. And yeah, it's amazing. So if anything, I suppose it intensified how quickly we need to change into certain areas. If you were to think about in the small church you're in, what is the next area that you think we will, if we don't, that we should be pushing ourselves into? If maybe, I'll let you go at that. Yeah,
Ron. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. The two things that are on my radar right now. The one thing is definitely we want to keep on streaming going forward. Yes, there might be a person here or there who might on a Sunday morning decide to stay home, have a coffee, sit in their PJs and watch the service. But I think we're probably going to have to make some sort of theological argument for as to why people should actually be in church and not just watch from home. So we might have to make that argument so people really get that. But for most part, I think people will still come to church, to the building itself, but it will really help those people who are shut in, or people with, who are traveling, or people, even friends, because we have some people watching from New Zealand and from, the East Coast and so forth. And it's just not possible if you don't stream. So I think we'll definitely keep streaming. And I think to do that well, I think we're going to have to expand our AV capabilities. So I think we're going to need people more trained, get more skills, maybe get some more equipment and so forth. So I think that's definitely something that we're going to do. The other thing that's on my radar right now is I think that COVID has really given us an opportunity to stop, to pause, and to kind of reset in a way. Now, you could have a reset that's kind of a knee jerk. I'm going to go back to exactly what I did before, and nothing's going to change. Because I mean, that's just human beings. We don't like change, number one. Number two, we don't like uncertainty. So if I know what I'm aiming at, I know what we did in the past, and I'm going to do exactly that, then I can be sure of what I'm aiming for, what my goals are. So I think that's what COVID has done for us, has given us that pause, that chance to reset. But I think each leadership is going to have to decide, what their goals would be or what they would be aiming for. So for us, I think this has given us an opportunity to form new goals and to kind of rethink what we did in the past and what we want to do in the future. And I think this pause just gave us that freedom to make those kind of choices. If your congregation is used to doing the same thing week in, week out for 10 years in a row, and you want to make a change to that, people are going to be up in arms, but if they were forced by COVID or by something else not to do those things for 18 months, for instance, and then you introduce a little bit of it, that's not going to be a problem for them because it's a new thing, right?
I think COVID's been good. I'm glad we're at least able to say one thing that's good about it. So. Let me venture into a whole other area. You came out of and worked in a Chinese church setting. You've been in South Korea. You're in a small church now. How do you see small churches working with multicultures? Is that possibilities? What is the direction that small churches can take in that whole area of other cultures and dealing with them?
Well, Ron, I know people have different thoughts about these things. My personal opinion, and I've thought about this quite a bit. So just one man's opinion is I don't think that every church can be a multicultural church. I think some churches have a calling to reach people from the same people group that's predominantly in that congregation. And that could be, whatever ethnic or cultural background the folks are in that church. And they'll be really good at meeting the needs of those people and of bringing in new believers from that same sort of people group or that same culture or ethnicity. But I think some of us are able to transcend and to cross those cultural and ethnical boundaries. I look at the church spoken of in Revelations, from every tribe, nation and tongue around the throne, and I see that as prophetic. I see that as God bringing together everyone that He scattered in Genesis 11 with the Tower of Babel. Everyone is now redeemed and brought together, and there's a unity that's formed from all these different people from different tribes, nations, and tongues. So I think there's something beautiful about a church that can be multicultural, but I think it's very hard to do.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's for everyone. In our own church, we have, like I said, about 60 to 70 people, but we have 15 different nationalities.
Oh.
So we are very, very multicultural, and it's something that's on my heart personally. And I would always advocate for that, and I would always aim and drive towards that. But it's not an easy road to walk.
I spoke with a pastor in Banff who had much the same, many different cultures, just because of where they are set and the people that come to work in Banff. He found that cultures worked well together, but at some points when one culture becomes predominant, they become predominant. Do you find that happens, that all of a sudden it's not us together, it's we're in charge and the rest of them are still, I'm not even sure what the question is I'm asking here, Brian.
Yeah. It's a subconscious thing, right? It's not a conscious thing. I've seen some churches where they would say from the pulpit and in their literature, they would say we're multicultural. But at the same time, what they actually mean is we do things in a certain way, which is the predominant culture, but we're open to all the cultures to come and join us.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a blind spot because they don't see it. It's subconscious. It's not a conscious thing. So let me give you an example. I did a missions trip to Congo. Now, if you're in Africa and you go to Congo, it's a totally different kind of church that they have. We opened a new church, and basically what it was is just a piece of land with nothing on it. We were going to open a church that day, so the first service was scheduled for that same day. So we went early in the morning, and the first thing we did is we had to dig a huge hole so that there could be a toilet.
Oh, okay.
This is a piece of land out in nowhere. There's nothing close by. So the first thing we have to do is build a toilet. So we dig this hole. We put some planks down and put some corrugated iron around to give some privacy. But you do the toilet first. Then we had to do like chairs and a tent. So we just got a canopy, and then we got to get ready for cooking. So we got fires going so there could be food. Then people start coming. And as they start coming, there's a bit of a buzz and so forth. And eventually you realize this is a whole day affair. They don't just come to church for, 60 minutes. It's the whole day. So my example now, I want to bring it back to our context here in North America. So you could say, we're open to all cultures, but we can have church for 60 minutes. We're going to start at a certain time, and we're not going to, have anyone late, or someone will speak to them if they come late, and we'll end at a certain time. And that's just the way it's done. Now, that's not the way it's done. That's the way it's done in a certain culture. But no one really realizes it's a blind spot that people have. So subjectively, they're like, we're open to all cultures, and no one's dominating, but someone is dominating. Now, if you really open and you say, okay, I'm open to having some African folks in my church, and next Sunday we will start at 9, maybe go to 4 o'clock. We'll see how it goes. That's when the African person will feel very comfortable. They'll be like, this is how we do church. Mm-hmm. But not for some other folks. And so subconsciously you do have this phenomena where there is a dominant culture that kind of does things their way, mm-hmm. but they have a blind spot. They don't see it that way. They think this is just the proper way to do church. That
takes a lot of work. To keep up with that. Wow.
Yeah. So for leadership, if you really want multicultural, you really have to pay attention and listen to all your cultures every step of the way. every time you assume this is a decent way to do it, I think this is fair to do it this way. It just might be a dominant culture bias that you have. So, and certain cultures are very acquiescent, and so they will always say yes. You say, well, is this good for you? Do you like this? They say yes, we like this. Yes, this is good. In Africa, it's really rude to say no to a person. So if someone asks you directions, if you stop and you ask directions for a guy next to the road, you'll say, do you know how to get to this place? He'll say yes. He doesn't know, but he'll say yes. And then you'll say, well, can you give me directions? And you'll say yes, because you want directions. And then he'll start giving directions, and you'll get totally lost because he didn't have a clue where you want to go.
Okay. That again, here's 1,000 more questions, but let's jump to something else here just for a moment. You mentioned that you come out of a law background.
Yeah.
And I've been noticing in a number of small churches that they've become multivocational, or at least the people that are in leadership, and perhaps the pastor themselves, have had various vocations over the time that they've been in ministry. Do you see that as an aid? Do you think people in preparation for ministry should be looking at the whole multidisciplinary type of approach? What are your thinking? What's your thinking on that?
Ron, I'm very biased because
I'm glad to hear that.
because I come from, I didn't go to university to study theology initially, and I didn't go to seminary, in my early 20s like some people have done. So I can't speak for them. But from my own bias, from the foxhole where I am in, I see a lot of benefit in that. For myself, having been in law, two things that stand out. The one is that you get to know people. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I think when you're a pastor or an elder, a leader in a congregation, I think sometimes people want to put their best foot forward when they talk to you, and it's sometimes a little hard to really try and see through that and see who this person is and how can I really help. What are their needs? How can I really help them and assist them to grow as Christians? So the one thing I think is you learn life experience and you learn about people, and this is what in the legal profession. You deal with people from all walks of life, from the bum on the street right to the guy who's a corporate crook, to doing contracts with companies. There's a whole range of people that you work with, and that's really helpful, I think, because I think in ministry, our focus is people. And then secondly, I think what's really helped me is in law, you have this way of thinking that's kind of methodical, that's analytical. And I think in many ways, you're able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. So, I can hear one story from my client, but I know that there's another person on the other side, and that lawyer will hear a different story. And if I just go with what my client is saying without trying to think through what it looks like from the other side, I'm going to get to court and I'm going to fall short. That other lawyer is going to mop the floor with me because I haven't really thought that thing through. So you've got to think it through from both sides, from my client side and from the other side. And I think it's the same thing in ministry. We have to think what it looks like for us as Christians, but also what does it look like for non-Christians, and certain doctrines that we just accept, that we don't question it. What would that same doctrine, what questions would that raise for a non-Christian, a non-believer, or for someone from a different tradition? So I might be, someone who thinks that baptism should be by immersion, and that's how I grew up. That's the right way to baptize someone. And now I meet a Christian who's a pedo-Baptist, and I struggle to relate to that person because they've just got it wrong, totally wrong. Whereas I think when you can put yourself in their shoes, you can really try to think through why they believe that, and hopefully come to a point where you can actually accept them as brothers in Christ and say, you know what, maybe we have different interpretations of some things, but I think we are both born again. I think we are both children of God, and I think that we can be fellow believers and brothers in Christ.
Okay, time is sort of up, unfortunately. Okay. It's going way too quick. Let me just finish with one question. What advice would you give to someone who is considering going into ministry in a small church setting? What advice would you give?
So the first thing I think that you need to do is you need to realize that the people that you have are the people you need to work with. So you need to build a team. The pastor and the elders, if you have deacons or whatever your situation is, but the people in leadership in your church, you need to bring unity amongst them. So do your best, work really hard for unity amongst your leaders. Because if you have them working together as a team, if they're all on the same page, you're going to be successful and you're going to enjoy your ministry. If there's infighting in a small church in leadership, there's nowhere to go. And you're going to have, it's going to be really hard. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to think about what exactly you want to accomplish and to see what you can accomplish with the people you have. So don't try and do 20 things. If you only have people to do 10 things, then choose your 10 things and do those 10 things and get them done because you've got the people for that. Don't try and do 20 things and say, well, I've only got 10 people. And so, I can only do 50% of what I want to do.
All right. Well, this has been very helpful. Yes, your law degree, systematic background is very helpful. I get points out of this and it's marvelous. And I guess you get points from me for being so succinct. So
thank you.
Thank you very much. I've appreciated this very much.
It was great talking to you, Ron.
All right. Thanks.